So, Priscilla, let's just be clear. I mean, can you outline for us exactly what, when we say DACA, it's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, but what is it in terms of, it's a series of executive actions in a way, isn't it?
So this was a program that was announced by former President Barack Obama in 2012. And deferred action is a type of prosecutorial discretion. And so what they were doing here is shielding this segment of the undocumented population, young undocumented immigrants who came to the United States as children, from deportation, and also allowing them to work legally in the country. Now, there is a list of criteria that these applicants need to meet in order to qualify for the program, and that includes applying under or coming into the U.S. Under the age of 16, living in the country since 2007, and having no criminal record. So those are 3 points, among others, that they need to meet in order to receive, be a recipient of the program.
And so when Jeff Sessions announced this week that the president was going to rescind that order, I mean, what was the process of rescinding that order? And then we'll get into the argument that somehow this was a function, they had to do it. But tell us what the practical the steps that were taken to rescind it, and then we'll get into the argument that they had to do it.
Prior to the announcement, the day prior to the announcement, Attorney General Jeff Sessions sent a letter to Department of Homeland Security Acting Secretary Elaine Duke with his legal determination of the program. He cited legal challenges that have been made in the past to DACA and DAPA, which was another program protecting the parents of U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents from deportation. Then on Tuesday, the acting secretary, Elaine Duke, rescinded the memo that established DACA in 2012. So that's how we came to this ending of the program. Importantly, though, this is something that is happening on a 6-month delay. So it is in 6 months where we'll start to see those first expirations go through.
I want to get into in a moment, like what exactly happens theoretically when those expirations happen. But now Jeff Sessions gave his legal opinion. Presumably, right, when President Obama first instituted this program, which in my understanding is really a series of executive orders, or I should say sort of a cascading impact. If he exercises his prosecutorial discretion in regards to going after one segment of undocumented immigrants, if they make a determination that there's a certain segment of that population that will not be pursued, at that point, based on an 81 executive order and an 86 statutory law passed by Congress, the Attorney General can then decide, okay, well, if we have people who are authorized to be in this country, we can issue them permits. Presumably, when President Obama instituted this program, he got a legal opinion from the Department of Justice, presumably from the Office of Legal Counsel. Where is that opinion? Did Jeff Sessions get an opinion from the Office of Legal Counsel? How did Jeff Sessions come to that opinion?
So it's true that there has been a lot of legal determination around this program, and this was particularly true as this program was coming into fruition. This was something that the White House Counsel was looking at. This was something that the Department of Homeland Security Counsel was looking at. But the argument against DACA through and through from Republicans and immigration hardliners is that regardless of what the legal decision was at the time, it was the act of a president to decide that this segment of the population would be protected. So what they saw here is an overreach of executive authority, and that has sort of been the ongoing argument against DACA as a whole. And in fact, what they were signaling in this latest decision in providing that 6-month deadline for Congress to pass a legislative solution. So sort of acknowledging that this is something that Congress needs to do as the only entity that can change the nation's immigration laws, rather than, looking back at the way that these legal decisions were made in 2012.
How do they square that perspective on immigration with the ban on immigrants from 6 or 7 Muslim countries? I mean, the argument against the Muslim ban, at least as articulated in the courts, has been it was racially biased, right? Or it was biased on religious grounds. The argument was not that the president doesn't have authority when it comes to making certain immigration decisions. How do they square those two authorities that the administration claims that they have in one instance but not in another?
Well, but I think the other important thing to note here is that the Republican state attorney generals, a handful of them, sort of forced the administration's hand on coming down with a decision on DACA. So this was led by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who may be a familiar name as someone who has come up in these legal challenges before. And they provided this September 5th deadline for the administration to make a decision, to phase it out, or to go to court. And I think this is important to note because if they hadn't, taken action, they would have been in that precarious situation of having to defend DACA. There are, of course, exceptions to that. There were ways to get around that. But to have the Trump Justice Department, defend this program that he has campaigned against would have been a very precarious situation for the administration. So I think that's
politically
important
precarious.
Exactly, yes.
I mean, and part of it is I think they didn't want to defend it. I mean, Jeff Sessions, they just didn't want to.
Right, and again, this is something, and we knew they didn't want to simply by the way that Trump campaigned on the campaign trail. And this was, DACA came up repeatedly. He said that he would immediately terminate it. He spoke against this. He promised to rescind it. So, he came through on that promise roughly 8 months into office. But their hand was forced by the attorney generals that presented his letter to the Justice Department.
Theoretically, too, they could have said, we'll give Congress a year, right? Or they could have said...
They could have extended the deadline, yes.
Okay, so, all right, well, what I want to do, I want to take a break, and when we come back, let's get a sense of, from you, what happens next? I mean, from a practical standpoint, what happens next? What happens if Congress acts? What happens if it doesn't? What are the likelihood? Just by the end of the week, Donald Trump was singing a seemingly slightly different tune about DACA, or at least tweeting a slightly different tune about DACA. We will talk about that when we return. We're going to take a quick break. I'm Sam Seder. This is Ring of Fire Radio. We're talking to Priscilla Alvarez of The Atlantic magazine, and we'll be right back on Ring of Fire Radio.